Hey everybody, welcome back to the Over Sharon show. I almost said the wrong name of the show. I have too many shows.
What show were you going to say?
I almost said terrible podcast. I had that on my
Holy
mind.
smokes, because you were talking about Ashley earlier.
Yeah, we're
That's
gonna
probably why.
allegedly might have her on the show. So anyway, thank you guys for tuning into another episode of the Over Sharon show. I'm really excited today because today we're going to talk about something that you should never talk about. So that's always my favorite things to talk about, or the things you're not supposed to talk about. So we're going to be talking about religion. But before we do,
Spirituality.
religion, belief systems, cosmology, spirituality, all that stuff. But before we do, speaking of cosmologies, we're going to have Sharon pull a card for us. Hello, Sharon. How are you today?
I'm well. It is a rainy, wind gusty, cloudy day.
Are you talking about the weather now? I'm just kidding. Am I that boring? You got to talk about that now. Yeah, it's funny because here it's like 60 degrees out and sunny now. It was a little rainy, but it's going to be 25 degrees later tonight. So I'm really excited for a 40-degree shift in temperature. And I'm thinking that
That's crazy. That usually only happens like in the desert,
yeah, it's
crazy.
the desert of southern Connecticut. It's great.
Strange. Well, I pulled a card. And it's the Knight of Pentacles, which is a card I actually get this one pretty well, not super often, but relative. It's hard to see.
I like his helmet.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
The Knight of Pentacles. Wow, I think that's well, it's a good card for this show because I feel for this episode, because I feel that pentacles have to do with your way you're tied to this realm. Could it be like the earth, they say, or whatever, the dirt? And the Knight of Pentacles, if you're looking at esoterically, it's the top card in all of the what do they call them, the court cards. That's the word I was looking for. It's the top card if you're looking at esoterically, because it represents the masculine, and it's also motion because he's on a horse. In this card, you could see how the horse is actually still, so he's stable. So it's representing that even though he is in action, he's kind of taking a pause to think about what's going on and maybe assess his plans and make the next plans for how he's going to perform his assault, because he looks kind of like a warrior up there with that helmet, which I really love. And so it's like he's leading the army, right? What are we going to do next? What are we going to conquer? What are we going to take over? And I like that because that's kind of what we're going to be doing here in this episode. We're going to be conquering. Could it be
the topic?
We're going to be conquering some belief systems. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to save the quotes or do you want to read your quote?
Well, I could read
we have
this
several
quote.
Quotes. Okay. Yeah.
What do you think about the card, though?
Oh, okay. So let's see. Knight of Pentacles. Well, from what I remember about the Knight of Pentacles, I remember it being about like just being in a really good place and of like security and stability and wealth. Oh, is that the Rider-Waite?
Yeah, I was before we started, I had a Rider-Waite and I was putting it in order before we got on the call. And this was one of the cards that was near the top. So I remember that. And so I figured I'd pull it out. The lighting in here is a little, there we go. Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go. Open. Okay.
That sunlight is too much for you. See, sunlight.
Yeah.
So it's very similar, but what were you saying?
Yeah. Go ahead. I was just saying that from what I remember of the readings, it's about like stability and wealth, because Earth is tied to just success in your life, and which includes wealth. And we don't have to think wealth as in like fiat money, but wealth is in just a wealth of resources, even a wealth of ideas, a wealth of the things that you treasure most, right? Family, friends, things like that. So, and I think it is, it's very, I usually get this. I've seen it, I think, in present and outcome positions for me. So it's kind of a, like, you will enjoy this kind of like happiness and stability and wealth. And again, wealth doesn't have to be money stuff, but
Yeah, the way it's put, if you go to like a normal, if you just go get your cards read, usually they look at Pentacles, it's like a career thing a lot of times. And it's the same, like you're saying, it's not always wealth in what you're doing. So maybe it doesn't mean you have a job or you're making $1 million, but maybe you're just happy in the way you support yourself in this realm, and it's an even exchange. It's not hurting anybody. In fact, you're actually helping people. You're providing a service for people, and you're bringing overall goodness. So yeah, that's really important. All right, so let me read my quote here. And this is from the Bible, the book of John, verse 14, chapter 12. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do. And greater works than these will he do, because I am going to the Father. Whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. And that's verses 12 through 14, I believe. I didn't read 14, maybe. Let's see. Because this one, no, that's it. 14 is, if you ask me anything in my name, I will do it.
Yeah. And it's funny that you're reading it again. You're reading it, but for me, it's like I'm listening to it with new ears. I'm seeing it with new eyes, because about a year ago, I stopped doing the Bible readings that I was doing, because I was going through doing a Bible in a year, like reading the Bible through every year. And I did that about 3 years straight. So I've gone through the entire scripture 3 times. I've said that before to you guys, but I was very much reading it with very indoctrinated eyes, indoctrinated ears, indoctrinated mindset, that it was all literal and all this stuff. And that's why it never made sense to me, because I always wondered why things were said in such a way. And I was just like, people would explain it, and like ministers would get up and preach about it. And I'd be like, well, that's great that you see it that way, but I still don't even get how you see that. But okay, I guess that's how it is. And maybe I'm stupid because I don't get it. I'd kind of be like, oh, okay. But then I'd be like, still doesn't make sense. So now that you're reading it, after I've had like a good year break from reading it or listening to it, and now having heard different perspectives from like Bill Donahue on how to interpret scripture, it's just like, now it's like, like it makes more sense. And I'm like, whoa. So yeah, I always wondered why Jesus said, and even greater works than these shall you do. Because I was like, but he's Jesus, and it's like, he was like, don't worship me. Y'all can do just what I did and better. Don't trip, don't worship the messenger. But we're going to talk about that later, I think.
Yeah. And what you're talking about is perfect, because first thing we're going to talk about is following nicely with our theme of episodes 11 and 11:11. So if you haven't watched those, make sure you go watch those too. And make sure you hit like and tell all your friends. No, don't woke rape. Just the ones you think that'll get a kick out of the show. Send it to them. We're not for everybody. Oh, no, I think we are. I think we keep it in the realm of just questioning things. But so the whole topic of division, one of the biggest divisions I see in our current world is religion, cosmology, spirituality, stuff like that. And it happens exactly how you said, because you have somebody up in front telling people how it is, and then some people don't agree with it, So then they either feel stupid or they get out of it, and then they get into something else, and then they just point the finger and say, oh, that guy's wrong, that guy's wrong. And then they fight about it, right? I mean, it's like a story as old as time, allegedly. That
they're fighting about words.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
And
I was fighting words. I'm just kidding.
No, well, we were going to talk about that too, but I think that something we were talking about earlier, we wanted to bring up was that there's this saying, and I forget, we couldn't really find the quote or who said it or whatever it was, but it basically goes, spiritual texts or religious texts are as to the guy who gets it, the person who knows, basically, are at it's like the same as a flooded plain, or I'm sorry, it's the same as water to a place where there's a flooded plain. It's kind of unneeded, unnecessary, and
redundant.
Yeah, if somebody's already on the true path with whatever they believe,
superfluous,
their purpose or their dharma or whatever you want to call it. Dharma is a word that just means kind of like your path. It's the best way to put it. If somebody's doing that according to God, the creator, the all, whatever, then they don't need the religious text because they already see it. So really the saying is, it's saying that the texts are here for people who don't quite get it yet. And I mean, we're using a lot of quotes from text, so we're not saying that we do quite get it. So it's just a way to feel through. So I think
that's really reminds us of the quote of by the Tao, which is like, those who speak don't know. Yeah. And those who know don't speak.
Exactly. And that's perfect, because we're going to get into exactly right now. We're going to talk about exactly what words are and what they mean. And oh yeah, there it is, the Tao quote. And so we'll talk about first though, like the best way to highlight this, I think, would be to talk about Jesus and the way he spoke in the Bible. And most of it was through parables. When he was talking to people, he was out in front of the masses. Now, when he talked one-on-one, that's a little bit of a different story. But when he was out there speaking to the masses, he spoke in parables. And really, a parable is just a story that inside it contains a nugget of information for those people who get it. Just like you said, you have these new ears that you're hearing the Bible through. There's stuff that is like in between the lines that's coming through, and you're getting it. But the other good thing about a parable is it's just a nice little story. So it's not offensive, and people at all different levels can get something out of it, and it could bring them up. And there's none of this negativity, this division. I mean, some people could be like, oh, fuck that kid and the prodigal son, whatever. But but I think it's a far better way. And we're going to obviously talk about why that is in a little bit, but that's something we wanted to cover really, because it goes back to the woke raping thing, really, right? Jesus wasn't woke raping people in the Bible. And I think it's a good example that we can all learn to live by, because people say they want to model their life after Christ. Well, here's a good one for you. Don't woke rape people. And we're all saying this to ourselves too. Like I'm saying this to myself too, and sharing, because we're guilty of it also. You could even call this show that if you wanted to, we're trying to wake people up. But I don't think, even if you think of the term waking people up, what exactly does that mean? If they're dreaming and they're sleeping, if you wake somebody up in real life, they're going to be pissed off. Right?
Yeah.
Unless it's time to wake up. And the other thing we wanted to say that's really funny is that goes along with that quote we were trying to put together, or I was trying to put together, is that nobody in the Bible had a Bible.
Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing, right? Nobody had this collection. So maybe it points to another time where there was a golden age where people were kind of got it. Not everybody got it, but maybe the majority of people got it. And that's the story. It was the story of those people, really, right? And their struggles and stuff like that. And then we came to this later age. That's why maybe in the New Testament they talk about Jesus coming in, because you get to a time where everybody's kind of forgetting about it, and they're just going through these rituals and they don't even know what they mean. Like it's like when you go to a mass or something or a church and it has no feeling for you, it's kind of dead. It's
Totally.
I think there's a quote, it's like from the Tao, I think it says something about religion being the husk of spirituality. It's just like this rite that's performed. But the good thing about that though is, and I've said this in previous episodes, it's a way to transform, or it's a way to transport this information into the future for other people who maybe later will get it and they come to some awakening on their own and they start to figure this out, and then they see the texts and people talking about it and they're getting it, just like the people in the crowd when Jesus is speaking that were getting the parable, the real meaning of it. These people now can get it because that message is still there. So that's why it's not like I'm here to bash anyone's religion or belief system or whatever, because I feel it's all necessary to get the message forward, but we're just here really to talk about the division and the fighting and all that stuff, and why that could be.
Yeah. And one of the main things that causes a lot of this stuff is words. I mean, words cause this whole division. Language, spelling. So, I pose the question, why do people take offense at words? And something that I really always thought about ever since I was a teenager, because as a teenager, I used the F word like crazy back then too. And it's not like I do here on the show, but I mean, to me, it's just another word. And I know that Crow says things like words have meaning, but it's like, I want to explore, I guess, both angles, because I'm a Libra and I like to see both sides of everything. So, okay, how is there allegedly a such thing as a bad word or maybe a bad meaning or something? And or how can people say like, no, it's not a bad word, there's nothing wrong with saying this, but then say words have meaning? Like, what's the balance?
Yeah, exactly. And I think we were talking about, we talked about how people take different words and how, there's this whole school of thought, how you should never take anything personally, what other people say.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really talk about how your words are interpreted by other people, because what we don't realize, a lot of us, is we figure something out and then we try to communicate it to somebody else in the best way we know. And what we don't realize is, like we were talking about on last week's episode, there's this knowing involved, that when you know something, you experience it, and you have this point of view that you're speaking from. And if you don't realize you're speaking from this higher or different perspective, if you don't consciously realize that, your words are going to come across as offensive to people, because they might be taking things personally. And, it's just like a diet. Like when I told people I stopped eating wheat and bread and stuff, when I first started trying that like years ago, even before like gluten-free was like popular, people were just kind of like, oh, I could never not eat. They'd be like, oh, I can never not eat spaghetti. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't talking about you. I'm just talking about like how it feels for me. But immediately they're personalizing it, and it felt like an affront or an attack on their behavior.
Absolutely.
Especially once like I lost weight, I'm like skinny now, and I mean, I'm not like super skinny, but I just
like Santos Bonacci.
Yeah, I'm just more healthy now, I guess, right? I'm healthier looking. So people that aren't, now when I
love Santos, by the way, he looks really, really, really skinny.
Yeah, no,
I love him. I don't care what he eats. I just love him.
Yeah, I hear it. I mean, nobody gets it all the way right. So everyone's going to fuck up somehow. But, well, I mean, maybe, then again,
he might be right. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I mean. For him, he is right. Like I said,
for him, he's right.
Everybody's on it.
He knows his own body.
Yeah. And he just can't, he just doesn't want to eat animals, so. Yeah. But eggs are great though. But yeah, so the whole thing about words really we're gonna get into is about intention and stuff, right? And you were kind of telling a little story before we began. If you want to talk about, I mean, I kind of summed it up basically, I guess, by what I said. But if you want to give like a
Yeah.
real world example, or however you want to weigh in about it, how do you feel about intention?
Yeah, I can just quickly describe it. So I have experienced where my passion about a subject or my passion about something I'm bringing up to somebody has caused them to be offended by my words, where my intention was not even remotely trying to be offensive. So there's that fine line of, is intention everything? Like Fortune Germain was talking about on Crow episode 388, which I'm still listening to. It's like really good episode. And I say that about a lot of them, but they are good.
So damn good.
But like I personally think intention is everything, because that's my karma, right? My karma is my intention. And if I had no ill will or ill feeling in doing so, then I don't see it as affecting my karma in a negative way. Now, does that mean that I shouldn't be careful about what I say to people and how I say it? No, I should have some level of awareness that I know, like I've seen it in the past, that people make comments that I'm a bit more aggressive or a bit more passionate about the way I say certain things. And
By the way, I thought you were going to say people say that you're going to say a bit. I thought you were going to say bitch.
Yeah, and they might,
like, Sharon.
They people might.
It sounded like you're going to say that.
A bit more passionate.
So people say I'm a bitch, and no.
Yeah, I mean, they might, right? I don't know. Potentially. So I definitely have seen that also, like when I've done profiles for like personality profiles with like the zodiac in mind. So like things like the personology, the like numerology of your birthday or something like that. Like the natal chart and all that stuff. Like I have seen hints of it here and there that say like, because of your passion and everything, the way you say things comes across like this. So just be aware of that, So yes, I could tone myself down. And that is why, just as I've grown in some ways, I hope, things like the Tao, where it says, those who know don't speak, those who speak don't know. I take that into mind. And I've become a lot more quiet over the years as I watch myself and how I behave and how I react and how I respond to things as well. But yeah, so that was just the whole concept of like intention and how we could potentially, even without intention, we could affect people negatively because of their response and their reaction.
Yeah, because like they said, like one of my favorite sayings goes, the path to hell is paved with good intentions, because everyone's like, well, I was just trying to, and I understand that. But if you are somebody who believes you have a higher knowledge on something, or you're more informed, then it's really up to you how you proceed from there. So if you are this more learned, mature person, then act like it,
Yeah.
And I can even point, we were talking about this before with the golden rule, which is do unto others as you'd have done to yourself. And I like to look at it in the negative and the apophatic way, which is do not do unto others which you do not want to done to yourself. And people could say, oh, I want the truth, I want just people to tell me the truth. But trust me, there's some things that you don't want people probably to say or talk about, or wake you up from. I mean, there's stuff that I don't even, who knows, like the nature of what this really is. We're probably just not ready for it. You know, we probably blow our minds. So,
We don't
or
know
if
what we
you
don't
figured out
know.
what it was, it might disillusion you to everything. You know what I mean? There's so many different ways because of your thought process now. You're just not ready to be unlocked. So if you're not ready, then they're not ready. So if they're not ready, it's not really consensual, you know, especially if they're getting upset. At that point, you're basically assaulting them with information. You know, I don't want to like say assault, definitely, you know, because again, it is just in how they're taking it, and you could
It's just
justify your own
words.
actions. You know, you could say, oh, it's just words, and but that's really, at the end of the day, it's kind of a cop out, because yeah, it is just words, but that's your point of view. And this isn't something you should beat yourself up over. This isn't why I'm saying this, but it's just another perspective to look at. Like, if we have figured out all this stuff, and a lot of people who listen to the show, I feel, have figured out, you know, in the conversations I've had, figured out a lot of stuff. Sharon's, you know, figured out stuff, all these things. And I think it does become our responsibility then to manage that information better, because you could send somebody down the total wrong path. You know, you never know. And again, it's their choices. They made all these choices. You know, that's this way you could explain it. It is on them at the end of the day. They're a conscious being. But just think about how you'd want to be approached when it comes to this. Yeah. So that's what I want to say about the golden rule.
Yeah. And so with all this, you know, talk of words and speech, what is speech anyway? And Brandon has some thoughts on this, I think.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I'm going to bring this guy up, Joe Rogan, right? This guy. So everyone gives Joe Rogan shit, and listen, I don't listen to Joe Rogan anymore. I get it, but he really opened up my eyes to a lot of things early on when I used to listen to his podcast. And something he always used to say is, and this was in reference to words you're not supposed to say, in offensive words. He's like, at the end of the day, we're just basically like animals or whatever it is, you know, not totally animals, but we're just like making noises with our face. That's what's going on. And then you're just interpreting these noises that I'm making. They're just the words, but they don't paint the entire picture. Because so when I'm talking to you, I'm basically, especially like, say I'm just going to tell you a story, right? I'm like, oh, this is what happened to me the other day. I have this picture in my head. I was there, you know, all this stuff. And now I'm just trying to relate to you the pictures in my head. So it comes down to people that just look at art, right? You say you're looking at a piece of art on the wall and you're trying to get some kind of interpretation from it. Someone else is going to have a different interpretation. So it's really, words are just an interpretation of what's in our brain. And the more I looked
exactly.
Yeah. And the more that I look into this stuff, and this is something that I've even, you know, like I had this idea, next time I go out, if I ever get to go on a date, you know, I date me.
Oh, stop it.
No, I'm just kidding. Are you kidding me? I always said I want to be single forever. I guess I probably said that too many times. Damn it.
You've probably said that way too many times. That's your karma.
Yeah.
Coming back to you.
That's what happens. No, but no, it's fine. It's fine. I was just being funny. But yeah, it's like, so I was thinking next time I go on a date or whatever, I would like to maybe do something where neither of us had to talk. So we could just go somewhere, say we went on a hike. Say, come on, don't you want to go in the woods with me, lady? I'm this giant guy. It'll be fine. And we can't talk now.
In the dock.
So, yeah. We're going to go at night on a new moon with no moon. So whatever it is, say whatever, you go for a walk in the woods or whatever. Just no talking, right? So just to hang out without letting any of that awkwardness, or because we don't know each other really. So anyway, that's kind of so that's kind of explaining the situation. But it's like, so it'll be untainted, I guess you could say, by words. So you just have this experience. So I always had that idea for a while now, and I was coming across other stuff, and it just kind of blew my mind. I was like, are we even supposed to talk? I mean, I don't even know how the thought came into my head, but it's like, maybe we're either not supposed to talk, or we just talk way too much. It's just like eating. When people get into sun gazing and these people who breatharians and all this stuff, and we've talked about this before, it's like, are we even supposed to eat, or we eat too much, or all this stuff? So it's kind of along that same line, right? Are we really supposed to talk? And I know that sounds, to most people, they're gonna be like, well, you have a fucking podcast, like, yeah, duh. And I get it, but I just think because, or maybe it goes along with those
At least we don't do it every day for multiple hours a day.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's yeah. But what I'm thinking is like, it'll get back to what was I saying? It's kind of like words. I kind of lost my train of thought there.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. I think I lost it before you said that. But oh yeah, okay. So it people will say that, it has to do with the age. That's what I want to talk about. So people talk about different ages. You have the golden age, you have like what's the one that the Hindus always say, the Kali Yuga.
Kali Yuga. I don't even know what that is.
It's supposed to be like the age of darkness or whatever. It's like the worst age, where people are just very materialistic and nobody really cares about spirituality that much, and it's just kind of,
is it kind of like the Wetiko we talked about last
yeah
time?
it's like this, it's like Wetiko taking over, so it's the same kind of thing. So maybe it's just a symptom of our age that we're speaking so much. Maybe in other times we didn't have to speak as much. I mean,
holy smokes, dude. What about what about we didn't do a lot of stuff? Like we didn't eat that much either, because some of those buildings that we see didn't have bathrooms. You know what I mean?
Yeah, these giant structures. I think they're just peeing out the window.
Women.
Listen, women back then were tough. They were like, we're peeing out of this window. They could aim better. Listen, in the golden age, women. Stop. Oh man, I just said golden.
God.
It was the golden shower age. No. It's gonna rain today. This is the comedy I bring to the show, everybody. I hope you're ready for it.
Oh God.
Yeah. So again, so I'm not sitting here criticizing that we all talk, but if you think about it, at the end of the day, if you just do a thought experiment, what are we usually saying when we talk? We're describing how we feel, we're describing stories, but a lot of times we're talking about the past, or we're talking about the future. And this is something that a lot of different cosmologies and religions and stuff, they always say that there is no other, only the present moment is what exists.
Yeah.
The past and the future. So we're really just lending credence.
Crow says it a lot too. Yeah.
Yeah. We're really lending a lot of credence to the past and the future. And something I want to say about Crow, which is amazing, in that episode, the Saint Germain episode, this is about division. When Crow's talking to somebody, like, we all know, well, anyone that listens to Crow knows that he's not a fan of the globe, and people will bring it up and they reference it, and it seems that maybe that's their point of view. They believe that it is a spinning globe, but he doesn't woke rape them.
Yeah, I know.
He just lets it go because he's so interested in the other information that they know. Exactly. And if you think about, I'm going to make a reference back to Married with Children and Al Bundy's show you probably never saw.
I did. It's the funny part.
Oh, awesome.
Just a little bit. I used to watch some of it sometimes.
Well, Kelly, who was played by Christina Applegate, there's this episode where she gets really, really smart, and she learns all this stuff because she's like supposed to be this ditzy blonde, right?
Yeah.
And in real life, she's pretty intelligent, which is pretty funny. So, well, who knows? But so she's really smart and she has all this book knowledge, but she forgets how to like eat and like do basic functions. In the way that Ted Bundy? No, Ted Bundy.
But
Ted Bundy's the serial killer.
God, really? Oh, geez.
Bud Bundy, the way that
Bud, the son?
The way the son describes it is, he says it's like a cup of water, and you fill it and it just overfills, and all the other, so she's able to retain all this good knowledge, but all the other stuff just fell out. So if you think about it this way, sometimes people spend their whole lives studying one particular thing, and they have so much knowledge in one area that when you come across them or whoever it is, so I think everybody has this, right? So, and we'll talk about this later, whatever you're putting whatever somebody puts all their attention on all day, their whole life, they kind of become an expert in it. So you can learn from them, even if you think that you know more than them in other areas, or you might think they're stupid. Like, say they believe in Santa Claus, right? You're like a 35-year-old guy who knows all about all this stuff, but whatever it is, but he still believes in Santa Claus. Now you could learn from him, or you could ridicule him about Santa Claus, but you don't know why he still has that belief or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
it's just another lesson, I guess, for us all to try to learn while we're
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. And I like that about Crow as well. I noticed that over, as as the episodes kept going, and I would hear, you know, he started off like where sometimes he would mention it, kind of like he would say, oh, well, if somebody was kind of pushing it a little bit much in an episode that was kind of related, he would kind of say, well, we see it differently or something like that. But at least that's from my memory, what I remember. But later on, it was just like, if somebody was like, yeah, the planet and the globe and blah, blah, blah. And he just skips right over and lets them give their point of view. Especially the Bach saga. Well, this was a long time episode, the Bach saga, where that guy was totally globe centric, whatever. And I don't remember how he addressed it there, but I think he was very respectful of the guy, because he wanted to know about the Bach saga. That was more important to him than trying to tell this guy that, it's not a globe,
And it's a really nuanced thing. It's like, if you're driving a car and someone's headed for a fucking brick wall, you might want to woke rape them about that, like, dude. But if you're having a conversation with somebody about something else, like we were saying in the last episode, you kind of prioritize the qualities of the situation, right? So
right.
Who cares? Like, there's so much, like, there's certain things people believe that I don't believe, but I can't blame them because of the inundation and of the way we were raised and everything, like, because I'm sure there's things I'm holding on to that probably aren't true, but it's just that it's the way we were raised. There's so much indoctrination one way or another. So it's just like it's just compassion. That's really what it boils down to. What we've been talking about so far in this whole episode really is compassion. And that's one of the hardest things, I think, to do, is to have compassion for somebody else, because what you're really doing at that moment is you're taking your attention off yourself, and you're trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes, really, at the end of the day. And it's hard for us to do because we've never done it. We've never walked a mile in someone else's shoe that we can remember or know of. We've only ever experienced everything right here. And most of us been fed a lot of materialism and stuff. And we're going to get into that, obviously. But I think that for me anyway, the compassion is what really helps. And like, anytime I have a conversation with Sharon and she's like spiraling about something, which I'm not trying to paint her in a bad light, we all know she's wonderful, but I'll just say something to her, and it's just that I agree with what she's saying, but then I'm like, well, what if I put myself in the other person's shoe? And then I just say that, and she's like, oh my God, Brandon, you're so nice. I can't, she's like, you have this wisdom. And I'm like, well, I just thought about it for a second, and then I just put myself in someone else's shoes. And I think it has to do with my character traits, or that's a bad way to put it, or like aspects about myself, like you were saying about astrology and all these different ways we get to know ourselves. It's something I learned about myself. I have this ability to kind of put myself in other people's shoes, and I wasn't really that good at it. It's something I had to develop, but the tendency was still there. And the more that I did it, the better off I became. And I think that one of the things that really helped me, and I talk about this a lot, is it's just a little everyday mundane stuff. Like, if you go to the store, say you worked and you went to the store and you just want to get some food and get home, and there's like people in front of you, and they're just taking forever in the checkout line. And I heard the story one time, somebody framed it like they were in a line, and there was the person in front of her had like a crying baby, and they're like, oh man, this baby. And then the cashier was like talking to the baby, and they were like taking forever. And so she was getting really pissed off. And then when she got up to the front, she realized the cashier was like, oh, sorry, that's my baby. I have to work all this time.
Oh.
So my mom brought him in to see my baby. So she was like, oh shit.
Oh.
So you never really know. Or like if somebody
Yeah.
cuts you off in traffic, you don't know where they're headed to. Like you could
Is there an
say,
emergency situation? Yeah, we've talked
yeah,
about this before.
and you'll never know. But if you just say to yourself, oh, maybe that's what it is, it's so much better than, because then you're not putting
Than
yourself in the center of
spiraling.
the situation. You're not being a solipsist, which is something we'll probably talk about again. But
Yeah.
it's, you're actually putting the needs of somebody else above you, but it's because it's appropriate, you know, just like we were saying with nuances, there's all these ways that these lovely concepts can be inverted and used to hold you down, I guess. So
Yeah.
we'll talk about
And
that too, though. Don't worry, guys. Get that popcorn. This is going to probably be a long one.
yeah, we suspect.
Non-GMO, of course.
Yeah. And this whole could language be a new learned behavior this life, or I mean not lifetime, this what'd you call it? Kali Yuga.
Kali, yeah, the Kali Yuga.
No, I'm just saying like this time or this time frame or whatever. Or this reset, who knows? Could it be?
Yeah, I think we're definitely shifting into another age.
That's what Crow was saying in one of the recent episodes.
Yeah, and I this is something that I've, even a belief of mine that even before I stumbled across Crow, I had, and it like blew my mind when he was onto it too, because um just the way that even myself, the way that I'm starting to behave, and other people around me, I'm starting to see it. But you know, there's some people who see it, and then there's some people who don't. And I think that we've talked about this before, about the split, and people are just going up and people are just spiraling. They're spiraling up or down, or you know, and but I'm just seeing this change. So it could be the age change. I mean, I don't really know how this whole thing works. Obviously, we know that nothing stays. That's like one of the constants in the universe, is it's always changing, right? But maybe we're coming to a point where it's going to be like a major change, or who knows. I'm excited either way.
Yeah. But I was going to bring up just that whole, like, could we have spoken telepathically in ages before, like we were mentioning? And so could it still be innate in us to still have that ability and not realize it? And I have experienced a little bit of this when I was married to Wesley, well, before we got married, when we met finally, because we met in high school, but then we finally got married years after that. But like when we finally met in person, because we had been sending each other emails and texts and things like that, and I kind of saw it like getting toward like, okay, I think we like each other. I think we really like each other. I think we really like each other. Then we decided to meet in person. He was going to be coming up from Tucson, Arizona to visit his dad. And we're like, yeah, well, we should totally meet up and catch up and everything. And, but that night we met, it was like, boom, it's like we knew. And it was like an inner knowing. It was so unexplainable. Like, you can't describe it in words, the knowing and the feeling you have when you know that this person is the right person. Like, of course, the first few days we were kind of like, is this really like going, like, is this really happening? I was kind of like having those thoughts. He was kind of like, you either want to be with me or you don't. And I was like, oh yeah, I want to be with you. Like, yes. But I was having those like, is this seriously happening? Wow. Like, it was just mind blowing. So it's very interesting to have that feeling of like an innate knowing that's beyond speech, right? Because it's like we didn't even need to say things to each other sometimes, because we just knew how we felt about it. It's like we didn't even need to say like, we're going to get married and we're going to do this, that, and the other. because it's just like that was just the next step. Like we just knew that that was the next step. Like we didn't even have to say anything. But that brings us to the topic of like, okay, so this is, to me, is like, we knew, and we knew that we knew, but there are things that we don't know. Like, and we don't know what we don't know, right? So Brandon had some thoughts about this.
Yeah, this is a concept that it came up in I think it's one of the tarot decks I have, one of the what do they call the other tarot decks? Not a tarot deck.
Oracle
Yeah,
decks.
it's an oracle deck that I got, which is basically set. There's 78 cards in a normal tarot deck. You have 56 of the minor arcana, 22 of the major, and most tarot decks, it's just a different representation, or that artist representation of that. So it means the same thing. Now, an oracle deck is quite different. It could be any number of cards, and it could be different symbols or whatever, and it just has all kinds of like a different theme to it, basically. So in this deck that I had, it was talking about there's things that you know, and there's things that you know that you don't know. And for example, like, we know how to set up Zoom and podcasts and all that, but I don't know how to fly a helicopter, or I don't know how to perform heart surgery. And I know that I don't know these things. But then there's things that you don't know that you don't even know. And for example, this would be one of them for most people. Like, they don't understand that concept of either not eating or not supposed to be talking or whatever. I guess that's the wrong way to put it. Or it's possible that there was a time where we didn't talk and we spoke telepathically.
And we didn't eat, but we let the sun be our source of energy.
Yeah.
What
Or we
else
just,
could it be?
or maybe food was our medicine. We just kind of ate when we needed something, or a little bit here and there. Yeah, a lot of it I think has to do with belief and stuff. But they're like, so this concept of there's what you don't know, it's just like with the Wim Hof method, or even that video that you sent to me. There was this guy who was able to make a fire with his hand, like he was able to use chi energy allegedly and start this piece of paper on fire. And there's other stories about that stuff too. Like Ram Dass will talk about his guru Maharaji, who was this guy in India who did all these incredible things. And even when he talked about it, he's like, listen, I don't, and this goes to what you sent me, because there's another guy talking about the same guy who studied under the guy who started the fire with the chi. He's like, I don't know if it was like a hallucination or if I saw it. He's like, but this is just what I witnessed. So this is what I know. And he's like, I don't know how it happened. I can't explain it. It's just a mystery, basically. And I really love that kind of being able to embrace a mystery. I think that's one thing that's really missing in mainstream organized religion, is everybody has it figured out and they know the answers. They feel like they do, the people at the top.
Oh my God. Yes, they do.
So, and I think a mystery, and this is something that Michael Tessarion introduced me to, is mystery. It's like, just be okay with not knowing. And it like took such a huge weight off my shoulders, because I really can't prove it. That's why I try not to make claims at the end of the day. So it's just like the Wim Hof thing. If you've ever heard of Wim Hof, he's the Iceman. He's this guy who can hold his breath for like a day or whatever. It's like like an hour or something stupid. Like, and he could swim under the ice, and he like,
I think I saw, that's a total sync. I think I saw videos of him where he's like under the ice and he's sitting on it from upside down and doing stuff. And it's like crazy.
All this stuff. And there was also, there was this one experiment where they were able to get the temperature of his kidneys, and he could like make his temperature rise in his kidneys when he was in an ice bath. Like, he'd climb Mount Everest, all this stuff, and he could teach other people how to do it too, this method. So I think that if you've never heard of that before, then that's a great example of something you didn't know that you didn't know. You didn't realize that the humans were capable of this. So I think it's something important I wanted to outline, because not only do we don't know it all, but we don't even know what we don't know.
Very, very true. Yeah. So
Here we go.
this leads to, the kind of the topic of our own discovery and our path and discovery of our cosmology, where we're at now. And so, like, for me, well, I think for both of us, it started with religion. We were both Brandon grew up in church stuff, and I grew up in church stuff. I grew up in a group of people that believes that this certain man is a prophet, and of course he died already, but they think he's going to come back to life and do all these things, and they're just very, very religiously tied to everything he said. And it's like, well, I believe everything he said, and not everything he said is from God, and blah blah blah. It's like, okay, that's how you see it, but I don't see it like that anymore. But yeah, so that's kind of what we're gonna start talking about.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us about, you talked a little bit about your experience, but why don't I know we've talked about this in past episodes too, everybody, so catch up on your oversharing. But we will definitely give a brief kind of synopsis of our own experiences with belief systems and cosmology and all that stuff and growing up. And I know Sharon's told me before, she has parents that are basically famous, just not, they were on TV, they were singers and all this stuff. And then it seemed like they kind of changed their life around, like they had maybe some kind of spiritual awakening or some kind of like religious experience that caused them to be more into, like, I guess you could say, born again Christianity or some kind of hardcore like Christian thing.
Kind of similar to that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So my parents were, well, my mom wasn't really well known or anything. She was just doing her own thing, and she was visiting her aunt in Mexico. And my dad was from Colombia, and he had been singing mariachi in Colombia, but he had already, like, he had gone to school for opera, and he'd learned about that, and he was kind of like dabbling in other stuff. And people in Colombia really loved mariachi music, so there were Mexican people up there singing, and he was like lead vocals or whatever, so he would sing with them. And one day they're like, okay, we're going back to Mexico, are you coming with? And he's like, no. And they're like, you need to come, because you sing mariachi, but you don't even know Mexican culture, like, you should come. And eventually they got him to go. And I guess the story goes, he was singing in nightclubs and doing all this stuff. But at some point he met my mom. The story is kind of interesting, but I won't go into detail. And then they got together, I guess, and they started singing. And my dad did meet famous people like Agustin Lara, and he met Cantinflas, the guy with he was a comedian, famous comedian, black and white, really funny guy. He met people like that. And then he had like a stage name that was similar to a guy who was famous at the time, because they said he looked so much like him. He should be, nicknamed like if he were his brother. So they gave him a stage name that was like, oh, he's related to that guy, which he wasn't. But he was doing all those things. He had the fame and the and all that, right? And then my parents moved to the States, and he was probably still doing some of that stuff, singing in nightclubs, who knows, right? And at some point, my mom, neighbor visited my mom and like read scriptures with her and stuff like that. And my mom was, convicted, and she felt like she needed to give her life to God, right? And so she did. And then I guess my dad followed suit later when she or somebody showed him a scripture in the Bible too. And that really caused him to like do a full like 180. And, he was probably living, I don't know details, but he was living a lifestyle that was, nightclubs, So he left all that, and he moved to Phoenix. And because one of the pastors that had gone to visit them in Texas was like, hey, come down to Phoenix. And he was like, okay. So he had changed his life. So you know, his lifestyle and everything to be a Christian. And so he followed, you know, and came to that man's church. And that's where I was born here in Phoenix. And that's how I grew up, in that church. And it was very strict and everything. And so there was a lot of like, well, there was like you can't cut your hair ever. You can't wear like women couldn't wear earrings. You couldn't wear like sleeveless stuff. You couldn't wear makeup. You had to be modest, you know, you couldn't show off anything, like you better not wear tight clothes, stuff like that, you know. So I grew up that way. And a lot of the stuff was kind of, because it was so pushy and so indoctrination style, I thought, you know, even back then I didn't like it. I mean, I was a little kid and I was just like, seriously, this is bull crap. Like I literally can't like play in the schoolyard with a skirt. I mean, that sucks. Can I just at least wear a pair of jeans, for crying out loud? And I wasn't allowed to. That's the other thing. I couldn't wear jeans or shorts. I had to wear long skirts. Well, at least below the knee, or dresses. So like, and it was just like a lot of restrictions. And I'm like, this is insane. This is crazy. I didn't like it. But I mean, that's how I was raised, and that's how I was growing up. So I wasn't the super rebellious type. So it wasn't until I grew up and I was almost in college where I cut my hair. And but it was still like lower back, you know, mid to lower back. So it was still long. And then, but I still was like, because there's that perception of like, what do you call it? Like you dare not do this or else. And there's this like fear of like, what if they're right? Like, what if that alleged, you know, preacher or alleged prophet, what if he's right? And then you have this like, you know, fear that you shouldn't really even have. So there was a lot of that going on, and that took a long time to like let go of. But it's like so I was kind of in and out of stuff a little bit with church until I married Wesley. And then I started going back to church when I was with Wesley. But after he died, like a year passed, and then I was like, okay, I'm done with this. And then I cut my hair short, like this short. And then I changed my clothes. I was different. I was like, that's not me. Like I never liked it anyway. So I'm just going to be who I think me is, you know. I'm going to buy the clothes that I like. I'm going to wear my hair the way I like, you know. And I didn't get earrings right away. I think I got them later. And so I kind of was like, you know what? It's like Wesley died. I don't see the point. Like I was already sad, upset that like I lost my partner, my best friend. Like, I'm like, you know what? At least I should just be happy. At least I should do things the way I want to do them and not be forced to do something I don't want to do. Because this church thing isn't going anywhere. Like they're not teaching me anything. There was no like compassion, or there was lots of judgment. Everything was judgment. Like, oh, if you wear that, then you're this. And you just like, F all of y'all. Pardon my French. So I stopped going to church and everything. Every once in a while, the only thing that I did enjoy the music and the singing and stuff like that. And to me, I was kind of like, there was a point where I was like, dude, I would love to go to a Black church. And I was like, man, if I could go to a Black church, then I would go, because I love, you know, the singing and, you know, like, you know, I love that stuff. So I thought about that, but I just was like, nothing ever really happened in that regard. And I was searching around. I was like, okay, what about these Messianic Jews? What are they all about? So I went to Messianic church a couple of times. It was kind of like, I just didn't feel it. I was like, yeah, they're cool, they're nice, but like, not feeling it. So I didn't go back. And then, that was just sporadic stuff, here and there. And after I came back from Norway on a business trip, and this was after Andreas had told me about the flat earth stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, I see it. I get it. Like, it didn't take me very long because I already knew that this world was deceptive. Like, I already knew that. So I was like, one more thing. Okay, here it is. Like, you don't have to really convince me that much. I see it. I get it. And it was the Bible that got me to see that, because like, I had always thought to myself, like when I was a teenager, I was like, I want to read through the Bible, the whole entire thing. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna start at the first page. I started at the first page. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. And I was like, what the F does that look like? And I'm like, I can't even imagine what that looks like. How am I going to read the rest of this? Like, I literally got stuck on that sentence. And I was like, okay. And I never read the entire Bible. Like, I'm telling you, I only did that like a few years ago, where I started doing that for 3 years straight. So I'm like, so when I saw this guy explain it in a video, and he's like, okay, look at all the scriptures that say this. And then he would show it. And I'd be like, holy smokes, it makes total sense now. I get it. Like, now I can actually read the Bible and it makes sense. Are you kidding me? Holy smokes. So then I was like, okay, it's on. We're going to do this. We're going to go to church now. We're going to find a church, So I was kind of on this, like, you know what? Maybe I should go back to church. So it happened. I found, it's not that I was looking, but there was like synchronicities that were like, I was listening to this one pastor online, and then he mentioned the name of his church. And then I saw a church and I saw the name was similar. And I was like, holy smokes. I had said I wanted to go to a church that was kind of like the guy who's preaching. And that's the name of the church. I'm like, dude, that's my sign. I'm going to go. So I did. And I was uncomfortable about it because like when I went by myself the first time, and I got these weird vibes from the people there. Like, there was no like loving, compassionate attitude toward me. It was kind of like, oh, okay, so why are you here? And I was like, and there I was telling my story, and like tears are coming down my eyes because I'm telling a profound, deep story about myself and telling them how I found the church and everything. And there was like no compassion whatsoever. Like, the girl just sat there and looked at me, and I'm like, are you serious? Really? And even still, I still went to that dumbass church, pardon my French. I still went to that church for, how long did we go? 2 or 3 years. And Dre was coming with me for a little bit. He was coming, but later on he admitted he wasn't really jiving with it that much. He was okay with it, but he saw through it. And he would tell me stuff too. He'd be like, don't you think it's weird, this, that, and the other? And I'd be like, I suppose. But yeah, he was seeing through things, and I'm like, well, maybe they're just being, maybe this, and I'd like make excuses. But yeah, it was like super, super indoctrination camp, and super, super do what we say type of thing. And I noticed it because they had like these groups called small groups. And then, it was like, oh, everybody should be in a small group. You're not in a small group. Oh, let's help you find one, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, what if I don't want to be a small group? But I was that's Andres was like, I'm not, like, he was never going to do that. But I was kind of like, well, I'm just going to try stuff out. Like, why am I here? I mean, I might as well dive in and see what everything's all about. You know, I started helping with the kids in the back. I started serving coffee. I mean, I was like, just all in. Let's do this. Let's figure this place out. And I mean, you don't learn unless you dive in. So I was on a deep dive accelerated course. So I got to see a lot of the weirdness. And it was like, when I was kind of like, I'm not really feeling this whole small group thing. I feel like it's very forced. I feel like it's very like telling me what to do type of thing, and very invasive and like personal into my personal life. And I was like, I decided I wasn't going to go anymore. And they're kind of like, you're not in a small group anymore, or, can we help you find another one? And I'm just like, you're trying to tell me what to do here? Like, yeah, there were other things going on too. And I was just like, I'm done. I am so done. And that was late February of 2020. So literally 2 years ago. And I wrote them a letter. I did, because I was like, because I had already like even made myself a member, and I'd gotten baptized and all this other stuff, right? Yeah, I even did that.
Yeah.
I took all the freaking classes and shit. I was like, boom, just do it. And then I was like, no, this is not what I thought. This is not what I wanted. Like, this is all just indoctrination and to keep people controlled. I'm sorry. Even with the facade of like, no, we're just teaching you what the Bible says and all this stuff, right? So I wrote them a letter and I said, please remove me from your membership. I no longer, see the same way as you guys see things. And I think it's best that we just part ways or something like, I can't remember how I said it, but it was very polite. And but I did throw some nuggets in there about other stuff. And I just, I literally got an email back from one of the pastors who was like my age or younger. And he was just like, I think he literally was just like, okay, or something like that. And I'm like, really?
Okay.
And it was like, let us know when you find a new church. And I'm like, I ain't gonna fucking tell you where I'm going. You know what I'm saying? Hell to the no. I'm sorry, I'm getting all spirally right now, but
how dare you?
This is what Brandon sometimes experiences when we're on the phone. But yeah, I was like, no, you're too invasive. I ain't gonna tell you nothing about me. Bye. I ain't never coming back. So to any church, unless it's Bill Donahue's church, that's the only church I would even go to.
The Church of Bill Donahue.
Maybe. Yeah.
So do you think did you ever find a place where you didn't believe in God, or you thought it was like you became agnostic or atheist or any of that?
No, I don't feel like I ever came to a place where I didn't believe in God. I have thought about the questions of like, now that I see things the way I see them, I'm just kind of like, well, like, what is God? Who is God? Like, is the creator, is he one being, or is he multiple beings? Like, what is the creator? Because to me, that explain, like, that is the word to me that is like the above everything, the one above all, the all father. That's the creator. So to me, when I use the word God anymore, I don't see it as, I see it as kind of an extension of the creator, but not the creator. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's kind of confusing.
Well, it's all right. It's how you see it, and you just see it differently.
Yeah, I do see things differently now. Yeah. Because well, we can talk about later, well, like the stuff and how we see things now. But that's kind of how I left churchianity. And I was like done with it. And that is the beginning. Okay, so that was the last, literally it was like a week or two before they closed the church or did whatever they had to do because of 3/11/2020.
Because the
You know what I mean?
season.
Yeah. It was like,
because the
dude, no one's even gonna freaking notice because like no one's at church or hardly anybody. So it was just hilarious. Like the timing and the syncing and everything. It was just so funny.
Yeah, it worked out really well.
Yeah. And then after that is when I started, on my path of like learning about lots of things. I kind of went into a Torah observant journey where I was kind of looking into it, kind of like I went back to church. And this time I wasn't super, like I didn't join a Torah observant church. I was just like in the circles of people who knew about it and stuff like that. And there's this guy, Justin Best, who was pivotal in my like path because he started talking about stuff that was kind of taboo to talk about. And I was like, I'm all ears. I want to hear all kinds of stuff. I don't care. I want to know it all in a sense of like, I don't want to be lied to. I want to comprehend as much as I possibly can. So he kind of got me started looking into things that, you shouldn't be looking into those things type of thing. So because of him, I was open-minded. And then I started looking into all sorts of topics. That's when Adam and me and some other ladies that I know that came from those circles as well, we all kind of started going into this, like, wait, what are we doing? What, like, starting to question, like, what is this whole like churchy stuff? Like Torah observance is just another way to get you into the churchy stuff. Like indoctrinated in like, oh, we should do this like this and we should never do it like this. And, like, yeah, it just, again, more rule following instead of like really actually thinking about it and going, why? Because, and the other thing was that was funny was like, I think this was in 2020. I had just heard about Owen Benjamin because one of my friends that I met through this whole group, she told me about Owen Benjamin. So I heard about him. And then because he had on, I think he had James True on, I was listening to some of James True's streams as well. And he talked about the eye of Ra and about your aperture. And that was gravy. Like, that was like, holy smokes. And I sent that to Adam and Adam's like, what the, like we were both like, holy smokes, this stuff is crazy. But then I brought up, I was starting to question circumcision, which was a total taboo, but Owen Benjamin was doing it too. And all I was saying was like, wait, Owen's asking why. And I want to know why too. Like, why? Like, and I thought to myself, okay, Crow says there's no lie in nature. So, okay, let me think about this logically. Do animals have to do that for any reason? And if not, then why do we have to do it? So it was like making, trying to, and I didn't understand everything, but I was beginning to ask a lot of questions that were taboo. So all throughout that, like it was all through 2020 and all through 2021. And like, I want to say mid to late 2021, when I was just at the point of like, I'm done with all religion. Like, I don't call myself anything because then that's putting me into a box. That's labeling me. And so then you can make assumptions about what I believe and what I don't believe. And I can't even tell myself, I can't even like describe to you what and what I don't, because I don't know everything. And I don't know what I don't know, like we just said. So I will not label myself. But I am pagan and heathen adjacent. Now. So yeah, that was my story in a nutshell.
It's a big nutshell.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. It's the Over Sharon show. I'm just giving you a hard time. No, that's great. I love that perspective. And you even said things in there that I didn't know. from previous conversations. So there's a lot of nuggets in there. So I could say for myself, grew up Catholic. I was an altar boy. I went to Catholic school. I always had this fascination with like heaven and hell. I was always afraid to go to hell.
Mhm.
And then I went to, my mom got into this born again Christian church. It was an Assemblies of God church. And when I was like in fourth grade, and I think I've told the story before, and I really got into that stuff. I saw things, I felt the Holy Spirit. I saw people get healed. I saw somebody I know that had a big tumor and then it disappeared, so there's things that, I've seen people that were in wheelchairs get up and walk. I don't know, now that I know about what I know about people in wheelchairs, it's pretty hilarious. Maybe, maybe they're faking it, whatever it was. Or the thing is too, though, it could have been a psychological ailment that was causing them to not walk, and now they were able to see something, and now they're able to overcome that. So I don't, I'm not trying to.
Well, I mean, you can't deny that, and I didn't really know this either, but like back then, but when people got prayed for, I mean, that's intention, and that's many people in one building having an intention over this person, and that can do a lot of things.
Yeah,
right?
especially if you think about psychology, because so many people act and react to the people around them, and they kind of just fall in line. Like we call them sheep, sheeple or whatever, but we all do it to some extent. So I think that there's something in there too, because if you have the belief that everyone around you believes it, then you're validated, so it must be true. And what we know, what we talked about, like what Wim Hof and that other guy, they're doing it because they believe they can do it. Because if they didn't, he would froze to death on the top of the giant mountain. What's the name of the mountain? Yeah, so
Kilimanjaro. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Yeah, but so that, I think it has a lot to do with that. So anyway, I really got deep into the Bible and into this whole born again thing, and I still think now my biggest fear was like every day I'm like, am I doing things right? Like I thought I didn't read the Bible enough, and I thought that was going to lead me to go to hell.
People in the Bible did not have a Bible.
People in the Bible did not have a Bible. Unfortunately, no one was there to tell me that then. So as I got older, we got away from that church, and I just had this vague feeling that I was probably going to go to hell because I was a backslider. But I didn't really think about it much though in like high school and stuff. When I got out of high school and I joined the Marine Corps and I went to boot camp, though, it was every Sunday you could go to church. So I picked a church that was like, because you can kind of pick which one you wanted to go to. And so I went to the one, it was like,
do they have like temples or Buddhist type stuff, or like,
I don't know if they had that,
things like that,
but I know they had like, they might now because they had different, but they also, you didn't have to go. You could also stay and do whatever you wanted to,
okay.
Whatever it was. So I know they had like the big ones. I don't think they had anything Muslim though. Probably not. But, so I got back into like the singing and the cheering and all that, and like praying and going to like doing Bible stuff. And I still have it. Actually, I have a New Testament Bible. I think it's just New Testament that they give us, like a pocket Bible. And, so I would read that a lot, and it definitely helped me, like I can't say that it was a total negative experience, but if I look now, my actions, I was in the military, and now, my different view about the military, I could see how it was really just a way it was like a pacifier for people to keep
maybe
them
escapism.
Yeah. It was like also, it was like a way to quench this thirst that people had, but it's like drinking beer. You think you're like, yeah, I'm not thirsty anymore, but you're making yourself more thirsty. It's kind of like that endless cycle. So but once I got out of boot camp, I was in and out of it a little bit, but I never really got back to it. I kind of it was just something that was there. And the next thing I really remember about my beliefs, or when I encountered that movie Zeitgeist, and it was about like 9/11, showed a lot of truth, and then it went to religion, and it showed all these parallels in different religions, you know, like Christianity and all this other stuff, and the whole story about Jesus and how it apparently had been done before. Not the exact story, but the birth of the Immaculate Conception kind of idea, all these other ideas. There's, you could see, and it all, at the end of the day, they boiled it down to sun worship, basically. So it's like you're worshiping the actual sun, the cycles, what Christmas really is, and all this stuff. And so from that point, I just kind of became, I guess, agnostic, because I saw that it was just a control system to keep people in control. So I just threw out the baby with the bathwater. And it's funny because it's really evident by the behavior in my life, because from that point I was pretty much just totally materialistic. You know, I was just into sleeping with women and having a nice motorcycle and have my own place, and you know, like having the nice newest gadgets. I was always obsessed with all that stuff, like the iPhones and all that stuff. And so I could see how it's crazy how your belief system goes hand in hand with like the way you live. Actually, I mean, I know shouldn't be a surprise, but that's just my, you know, my story about that. And then later on, the great Joe Rogan, I was listening to that podcast, and I started to get introduced to ideas of like Buddhism and all this stuff, and a lot of the Eastern traditions. And I really like that stuff. I got into meditating and all this stuff, and listening to different people talk about it, and like Ram Dass. And I started to realize that, because I never really said I was an atheist, because atheists always seem so hardcore to me. You know, like my friend, actually, we had a conversation about this one time. My roommate, he was telling me how he, you know, he was kind of like, oh, you know, I think I'm like agnostic. I don't really know. He's like, but I met these atheists. He's like, they wanted us to come over to dinner. We went to dinner, and they were like fucking hardcore into being atheist. And he's like, I don't really even care that much, you know, like that's kind of where I was at. You know, I wasn't like out there. I mean, I would mess with people if they mess with me. Like one time when I was in Virginia Beach, we were at this club, and I think I told the story. We came out, and there was like born again Christians on the street corners, like with signs and like trying to like save people. So I just basically told this person that they're worshiping the sun. Like I broke it down for him. So that, I mean, I would do that, but that's because he was, you know, trying to mess with me. So I was like, all right. But
right back at you.
Exactly. I got
sorry, are you off your track?
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, isn't Gnostic, doesn't it pertain to knowledge? So basically, if you're agnostic, you're saying you don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
which is honest.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Atheists are like, they're what is it called? They're making claims. They're saying there is no God.
Exactly. It's just the inversion of religion. Yeah. They worship the fact that there's nothing. That's where they put their attention to. Yeah. Really. Yeah. So no, that's fine. So I basically got back into some kind of spirituality, and I realized that this wasn't a grand accident. You know, it wasn't just some cosmic accident. And just over the years, my aperture has just opened up to see that, you know, I had to see that like evolution doesn't make sense. The Big Bang doesn't make sense when you really look at it and talk about these ideas. And, you know, some people will be like, how dare you? How do you make these claims? And it really comes down to like, do you think that the human eye can, it's kind of like saying that if you just left a junkyard after billions of years, like a 747 would appear because like the wind is like putting everything together, you know, it's just crazy. So once I realized that, I realized that it wasn't just a mistake, but I was more into the Eastern traditions like Buddhism and all this stuff, because they tell you it's really about not worshiping an idol. It's just about experiencing everything and how you look at stuff and all that stuff. So that's kind of where I got into where I left off, I guess. And then once I got into tarot and to all these other things, I guess we could talk about that once we get into that. But that's basically was my, in a nutshell, cosmology or
deconversion.
Yeah, I was agnostic for a while, and then I started to come back in, maybe even like 7 years, something like 8 years. Then I started to come back in through meditation and all this stuff, and I just started to realize that there is something to this. And then plant medicines helped also. I did some mushrooms way back when, and again, I'm not suggesting this for anybody. You're adults if you listen to the show, I hope, and you could figure out your own thing. But I saw the connectability of everybody, like how we're all connected, and it really opened
Yes.
my eyes to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And just you saying that makes me think back on the whole, like, we don't have to say words. We don't even need words. That's something that Philip and I kept saying in Sedona when we were sitting next to each other on the couch tripping, because it's like he even said to you guys, I can sense her, I can feel her recognizing and seeing things. And then he and I kept saying to each other, words, like, we don't even have the words to describe what it feels like to be connected to each other, to everything.
There
So
are no words.
we didn't have to have words. It was just going back to the earlier topic we were talking about. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
But
that is. It just, yeah, it is crazy. Like there are no words to describe it, just like a painting, you know.
exactly. Yeah. And we do have this quote by Buddha, Gautama Buddha. It says, what we are today comes from our thoughts of yesterday, and our present thoughts build our life of tomorrow. Our life is the creation of our mind. If a man speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering will follow him as the wheel of the cart follows the beast that draws the cart. If a man speaks or acts with a pure mind, joy follows him as his own shadow. And that segues us to the topic of kind of what brought us back to just the spiritual life, the spirituality.
Yeah. And I think what brought us back is that experience that we had in our life, is that knowing, which we're going to share. Don't worry, everybody, we're going to overshare. But this quote also goes back to what James True's concept of aperture, because it is in how you look at it. Just like we said about getting stuck in the line at the grocery store, you know, you could think about it how you will. Even if there's not someone showing a baby to somebody, you could just make up stories about every person in front of you, and you could just make it the bet, like, oh, this person's buying groceries for their neighbor because they're starving, or, you know, you could just do that. And again, it's very nuanced, because like we'll talk about with the new age trap of inaction and stuff, these ideas could get people caught into some kind of inaction or in a place where they're being taken advantage of. So but for what led us back, I could definitely say the meditation is what really helped me and opened my eyes to things. And then once that, I just started to see that I was looking at the world differently, and that's what really affected how I felt, like the suffering. Because I think there's another quote here about pain, and it says pain, this is also from Buddha, and it says pain in life is inevitable, but suffering is not. Pain is what the world does to you. Suffering is what you do to yourself. And there's a little explanation. It says, by the way you think about pain, you receive. By the way you think about the pain, you receive. Yeah. So it depends on how you think about how this pain is coming at you. Because, again, to quote Buddha, to continue, he says, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. And their little explanation is, you can always be grateful that the pain is not worse in quality, quantity, frequency, duration, etc. So yeah, that's one little simple thing. You could always just be thankful that the pain, you know, because like I always would say to people, even when I was in the Marines, like, it could be worse, you know, it could always be fucking worse until it's not, and then you don't got to worry about it. So that's this kind of stuff that really led me back. And again, I had those experimented with the plant medicines and stuff, and got to see the connection. And then once I just started to see all these synchronicities line up, I think it's what really did it for me, because I started to realize that this universe is what you make of it, and the attention that you and intentions that you put into it, and where you place your attention. And Ram Dass was somebody who really helped me with this, because a lot of people say he's new agey, but if you listen to what he really says, he's always telling you to question everything. And I think that ability that I always had to question everything started to become a strength of mine instead of like a weakness. I started to perceive it that way. Not that I ever perceived it really consciously as a weakness, but I always saw that how it didn't kind of made me stand out. And sometimes I didn't get included in things because of questioning and stuff like that. And I also started to rely and depend on myself more, and not hate myself as much. I started to get some self-love because I just started to get compassion for myself. And I think that's really what's most important, was the turning point in my life once I realized that I couldn't really love anybody if I didn't love myself, because I was just trying to paint a picture of somebody who I was, like this facade, just so people would accept me. And once I realized that my true self is actually a great person, if I do say so myself, it really helped me, because then I could be myself. And I realized that at first I had the attitude, well, if they don't like it, fuck them, right? And that's still a pretty good attitude to have. But like we talk about with the golden rule and stuff, it's not like you always have to be your total self all the time. And this is another thing I learned from Ram Dass. It's like, because I remember one point in my life where I just decided I didn't want to lie anymore. Because when I was younger, I didn't lie. And then I learned that I could be good at lying and deception if I wanted to. But then there was just this point where I just didn't want to do it anymore. And so I think that's kind of one of the major stepping stones, or one of the major things was I realized that I didn't have to tell everybody everything. So therefore I didn't have to lie. I could just hold things back, and I could just speak when it was appropriate, and give my opinion on things when it was only really relevant, or unless it was needed. Like I said, you're driving at a brick wall and someone doesn't see it, dude, wait, so sometimes you got to do that. But again, I was saying I learned this through Ram Dass. Is like, you don't always have to say everything. You don't have to lie, but again, you don't always have to talk. You could just keep your mouth shut and then let people ask you. And then once they start to ask you, it's a totally different thing. Even cosmically, it really goes with karma and stuff like that. Because if people are knocking on your door, then they're taking the responsibility upon themselves. And it doesn't always mean you could just unload on them, but that's kind of, they're climbing up that tree. You know what I mean? They're going to get that fruit or whatever it is. So what about you? What brought you back there? Unless you have anything you'd like to say about what I said.
Yeah, I do.
Please do.
So you were saying at the very end, unless somebody asks you, and it just reminds me of the human design, personality type test. It's not a test, it's by your zodiac, but by your whenever you're born or whatever. But
it's all a test.
But you and I are both projectors, and we don't come across very well when we're giving our opinions without being asked first what our opinion is. Like, of course, we're on a show here, so we're just oversharing here. But in person, when we're with someone else, talking too much and saying too much without someone asking us what our viewpoint is can get us into a place of discomfort, shall we say, because they may think we're over aggressive or something with our views. But yeah, so that it reminded me of that. But a lot of the things you were saying, I kind of resonated with myself, because I too was always questioning things ever since I was a little small girl. I would, like, if let's say my brother was like fixing the sink and he was down under there like pulling things out, and I was like, what are you doing? Why? What is that? How does that work? And if he was fixing a bike, I'd be like, oh, so what are you doing? What is that? How does it work? So I was always asking questions. And people don't like when you're in school, people don't like questions. And that's why I just thought of this right now, but that's why there's that fear when you're in school of like raising your hand and going, I have a question, because you might be looked on as stupid, but actually your question might be a good question, honestly, and, the teacher might actually not even know the answer. Kind of like that meme we saw the other day, which was like, really? But anyway, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, that can always get you in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. But so questioning everything, I was one to do that kind of thing. And the whole lying thing I resonate with, because I grew up knowing that I hated, like absolutely abhorred lies. Like I couldn't do it. I was terrible at it. And if I did, people would notice, so I just didn't, because if something happened to me, what came out was what happened, So I have kind of a funny story about that. So in college, I had pulled an overnighter because I was studying really hard for this exam. And I'm on my way to the university, and like on the street where, like, it's the street where I had to, like, maybe at some point I was going to turn and get into the parking lot. Well, it was like there was traffic in the morning because lots of us were going to school. And it slowed down enough that I wasn't going very fast, but literally I didn't catch myself, and my eyes shut, and I fell asleep at the wheel. And I bumped the car in front of me, and it woke me up. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, I just rear-ended somebody. And it was funny because there was like an ASU cop that was like right there. Like, he was literally right there, like two car lanes away. And he comes over to me and he's like, what happened? And I was like, I fell asleep, pulled an all-nighter, fell asleep. I have an exam today, whatever. I mean, I just told him the truth, because why was I going to lie to him? Like, how could I, like, I couldn't even, that's what came out, And the funny part was, okay, he wrote me a ticket or whatever. Right. And then, said that I could either dispute it, or I could go to the little courtroom and do that whole thing. And honestly, like, the person's car in front of me was just a little truck, like maybe like a small Dodge, like a small Ford Ranger or something. And all that had happened was that their bumper just kind of like went under, like it just had gotten pushed under like that. That's all that happened to them. I mean, that's a lot, but still that's all that happened, nothing else. And so I call my sister, because I had a cell phone. Wow, back then, like, it was a new thing. But I called her, and she's like, what did you tell the cop? Because the car was in her name. She's like, what'd you tell the cop? I'm like, well, I told him that I fell asleep. And she's like, why'd you tell him that? I'm like, because what else was I going to tell him? Like, I can't lie on the freaking spot. That's not how I work. So she's like, well, we're going to dispute that. We're going to the little court thing or whatever. So the day comes, we go and waiting. I don't know what's going to happen, but I was just going to say, hey, like, can I do some community service instead? Can I, like, I really can't afford this, ticket or whatever. Can I do something instead? And then, so I'm waiting. No one comes. The people that got hit didn't come. I don't think the police officer came either. So the judge was like, dismissed. And I'm like, it didn't even go on my record, like nothing. It was like, boom, forgiven. And I'm just like, I always saw that as like a sign from God that, like, you didn't have to lie. Like, you're rewarded because you told the truth and you weren't trying to be deceitful. Like, you weren't trying to be deceptive. So anyway, that was just an old story about, like, the truth. And that's how much I hated lies, is that I didn't want to be lied to. And I just couldn't lie myself. So, what else did you say? Like, not having to tell anyone everything. I often found myself like telling stories, and I would go into great detail about stuff. And then, either the story got too long and I never got to finish it because like inevitably I'd get interrupted and then I'd never get to finish the story, or I was just wasting time typing up or whatever, or telling my story and just it was too much. I didn't need to give all that info. Like it just needed to be short and sweet. So that's something I've had to learn over the years, is to be more concise. But to talk about what led us back, I'm trying to, okay. So the thing that I resonated with you, what you said was like alone time. And that I think is what helped me. Not so much that I was meditating because I wasn't aware of those things, but I think the time spent alone helped me because, and it was, I mean, I was kind of a loner already. I didn't, like before I married Wesley, I was kind of a loner myself. And then, but after he died, I was even more, a little bit. So spending, like being at home alone instead of him being there with me, that was just like, okay, now I'm alone with my own thoughts, you know? And then after that, I met Andreas, and then he and I were together for 8-ish years on and off. And I had moments of like when we were off because we'd broken up for whatever dumb reason. Then I'd be, I'd find myself alone with my thoughts again, and when we had arguments and fights and stupid crap like that, I was alone with my thoughts and all the stuff that had transpired and why did that happen? And whose fault is it? Like, did I really cause that? Does it matter? All that sort of stuff. So being alone with my thoughts, I think really was a catalyst to just kind of coming to new conclusions and things like that. And more recently, I feel like Bill Donahue has just really been, he's kind of, how do I say? He's just kind of made it clear what the Bible really was, an esoteric text. It's not meant to be literal. Like, okay, maybe there was a guy, and I'm making claims here, but I'm not, because it's saying maybe. Maybe there was a guy named Jesus who really existed. But if you look at the way he explains things, it really is esoteric. It's talking about our bodies. The Bible is talking about how our bodies work, who we are, why we're here, and what we're meant to do here. That's what it's really all about. It's not like, and it's wrapped, like we were talking about earlier, it's wrapped in a story that sounds neat. It's literally, Jesus was saying parables, but literally his whole story is the parable. Like the whole Bible around him is the parable. And he speaks in parables too. So I don't know.
It's some Inception shit. It's a parable inside a parable inside.
Yes, it totally is.
And just so people know, we're talking about Bill Donahue, not Phil Donahue.
Oh, yes, because some people mix that up. I forgot.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Bill Donahue is a guy who, I mean, you could just put him into any search engine and you could watch some of his videos.
Well, make sure you spell his name correctly, because I heard there's another guy with a very similar spelled last name, and he was a totally different guy. But
okay,
I've seen people mix them up.
This guy spells it like Phil Donahue, so you can. And he talks about, like Sharon was saying a lot, how there's all this other way to look at the Bible, like look at this, and the way he does it really makes a lot of sense. So I would recommend, if you're not familiar, check it out.
Yeah, he really lays it on the gravy, that is.
Blaze the gravy.
Yeah, totally. So kind of to segue kind of a little bit into this kind of topic of just church and stuff like that. We were asking ourselves, like, what does worship mean? And Brandon can go
Yeah.
into that a
So
little bit.
from what I've found, I define it like worship is really about where you place your attention at the end of the day, because there's so many things we could focus on, especially these days with the internet and TV and all this crazy stuff, that when you worship something, like when they're saying in the Bible and all these other different texts, I feel that's what they're talking about. It's like, where are you putting your attention? Where are you putting your time? Because that's really what's going to manifest fruits for you in the future. What you're doing in this exact moment right here in the here and now, what are you putting your attention to? And I think that attention is one of the most valuable things that we all have, we all possess. Because if you look at us, we're made in the image of God. God's a creator, so we're creating also, just on a different level. Maybe obviously we're not like creating maybe we are, who knows. But so if you look at it this way, though, if you are actually a little creator, a little piece of that God, how do we create? And what's the beginning of that creation? Where does it actually begin? And I think
Our mind and our thoughts.
yeah,
and
I
our
think the
attention.
seed of our action is our thought. And that's why a lot of times like even when I was going through Catholic stuff, and they would always be like, they would say to have impure thoughts is a sin. And I was like, that doesn't make sense though. That's so stupid. You're not doing anything. Why does it matter? And I think somewhere along the line, it got lost in translation, really. And really what they're trying to tell you is, or the message that's trying to be relayed, the parable message or whatever, right? The behind the scenes, read between the lines message is, when you think about something constantly, that's what you're going to start doing. And even how you look at the world is going to affect how you live. So if you have this negative thought on the world and everything is terrible, and you're caught in a cycle of thinking you're a victim and you feel like you're being victimized by whoever it is, that's going to affect your actions, and you're going to act like a slave because you're coming from a place of fear. So that's really what I think that is meant by worship. So when you hear Jesus saying you should worship the Father, it's really about putting your time and attention on the creator and the creation. And I mean, it's really whatever it means to you, honestly. And obviously, I guess, or maybe not so obviously. But for me, that's really what that means. And it's, if you put your time and your attention on the creator and the creation, you're in the moment, and you're just looking at everything around you, and you're in awe of it all. And if that's the way you're looking at it, I feel like your actions are going to be way more in line with nature, because you're going to be doing things that are not harm. You're going to be not harming yourselves and not harming people around you. You're going to be living more in harmony, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And that what you were talking about reminds me of something that my yoga teacher used to say all the time. And it's probably somebody's quote, but she would always say, where your attention goes, energy flows. And it's very true, like Brandon was saying.
Yeah. Just an example in my life, I would think about women all the time, constantly, and I would always be thinking about sex and all this stuff. So that's where my mind, that's where my actions went to. It's just like a drug addict. They're thinking about how they're going to get their next fix. Then they're constantly, they have this whole, like my friend who was a heroin addict, he told me all about it. Like he would just basically set his whole day up on how he was going to make money that day just to score. And like whatever he had to say or do to people or whatever it was, that was his main goal. That was his main thought. He was always focused on the drug, getting the fix. And so whatever, like and other people around him didn't realize that people are trying to help drug addicts, and they just they do what they can. But I think is what they don't realize is just a whole state of mind. It's a whole mind frame. So when you're talking to somebody, the person that's talking back to you is just a person who's trying to get their fix. So they're just going to tell you whatever they think that you need to hear. It really reminds me a lot of Gollum in Lord of the Rings. They're going to just go along with it wherever they think they can get the best outcome.
Yeah. So there's this other quote we had here that's by the Buddha. It says, "Our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. Suffering follows an evil thought as the wheels of a car." Did I already read that?
Yeah, you read that quote. That's all right though.
Did I? Oh, then I must have. I'm so confused. Well, anyway, that's very relevant.
Yeah, it is. And what we're going to be talking about next is great because we were just talking about lies, and we're going to be talking about what we found about organized religion and what it's 444 and what kind of how we can make these claims or statements about organized religion, what we found, like peeking behind the curtain. And one of them is lies. And actually it's funny because the inversion of it is truth. And a lot of this, all of this religion and organized religion that we don't agree with totally has truth in it.
Yeah.
It's like the bait. And the way I describe it to people, it's like when you're fishing with a worm on the hook, there's a real worm, but there's also that hook. So I feel like a lot of these religions are, like I was saying earlier, there's this itch that people have. A lot of people have these questions, or they have this feeling in the world, like they realize that there's a God or whatever, and they want to connect to it. And so organized religion kind of offers people a way to be connected, and you're doing it in a setting where there's a lot of other people around. So everyone around you is validating what you're doing, and everyone's doing the same thing. But like you said, the second that you start to question something, or if you have a different point of view and you ask and step outside the line, then you're immediately ostracized, or there's something wrong with you. And there's all these questions, and it goes back to they have to defend this certain tenets of belief that they have. And if you don't meet up with them, then you got to go, or you're evil, or you're the devil.
Yeah. One thing I really hated was when I would hear someone say, I would just be like, "Oh, I'm reading this book." And they were all like from the Christian section in the freaking library. You know what I mean? And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm reading this book." Da, da, da. And they'd be like, "Oh, did you ask the pastor if that was the book to read? Like, did you ask the pastor about that book?" And I'm like, I can't read for my effing self. Like, I have a brain. I don't need anybody to tell me what is appropriate or not appropriate. I mean, I could see if I was reading a freaking sex novel or something. Like, seriously?
Yeah, and that's funny because it reminds me of something I probably was going to forget to talk about. And it's the way we've talked about this before. It's the way we're raised in the society where we're always taught to get our validation from exterior sources. We're taught that we're impure, we're unclean, we don't know the truth, we have to listen, we have to get everything okay from above. And some of these organized religions, in fact most of them, that's at the top of it. So when I came back into my faith, and then I started to come across people like Mark Passio, and he would talk about religion and new age and government and all these different systems of control, I started to realize that there's just all these traps out there, all these systems of control that do contain a lot of truth in them. But at the end of the day, you're still trying to get your validation from an exterior source. You're still being controlled. And like you said, they were controlling the books people are reading, and a lot of this stuff, sometimes people need it if they're at a place where life is totally out of control. They might need
the discipline.
the discipline from exterior sources like that. But what I've found is that there's a happy medium in the middle there. You could rely on yourself and on other people, and you don't always have to take everybody's word for it. You take it in, and then you see how it feels for you. And this is something that's really cool with the trivia method. And Mark Passio actually talked about this. He's the one who kind of got me onto this, and it's just
I've never looked into it, and I've wanted to. The trivium.
The trivia method. Yeah, it's really simple. It's just a way of I guess learning, right? And what you do is you take the input. So you take the facts around you, the things that you see around you, and then you process it just like a computer, and then you output it. And the way that we're taught, they switch around level, step 2 and 3. So you get the information, and then instead of putting it through and seeing how it feels, you have to weigh it against these dogmatic set of beliefs. And if they don't jive with that, then you kick it out. So this way, it's a way of learning that's more intuitional, what makes sense to you, what actually feels right and wrong. Because if you think we're all made in God's image, then we should know what's right and wrong. And I think that no one's going to argue that people, even a child, knows what's right and wrong to do. You know, they could feel remorse, they could feel sorrow and all this stuff. And if you're not in tune with those intuitional feelings like remorse and all this stuff, they go out the window as well, because you feel validated in your actions because it's what you were told to do and it's the right thing. And look, it says it right here. So that's another step that was really another alarm, I guess, that went off in my head once I started to look at all these other different organized religions.
Yeah. And I mean, at the root of all of this is like, because we've talked about division in the last 2 episodes. And I mean, it really does end up causing division, because then you have somebody who says, well, I see it this way. And someone else says, no, I see it this way. And instead of saying, oh, okay, let's agree to disagree, or, oh, that's great, that's a different perspective, I never thought of that. You know, instead of that, it's like, well, no, I see it this way, and this is how it really is.
My way or the highway.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's why these episodes go so well, because even this episode might cause people to have reactions and then they might argue with us or whatever. But then again, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, you can argue about this minutia in your cosmology, but we can also talk about, what did I do all day? What did you all do all day? Are we making a positive impression on the people around us, or are we dragging them down? You know, that's more important. And then we could back up and talk about, you know, in my opinion, I think. So this genius of division, it's like it gets people arguing about this minutia, and they take that more seriously. And because I think at the end of the day, really, it is all about fear, because if they're afraid they're going to go to hell, that's a really big one. Then that fear, that irrational fear, in my opinion, is going to cause them to go against their intuition and argue with people about stuff like that, you know. And again, it could be maybe it's not an irrational fear for some people, because that's where they feel in their cosmology. So I could see why that would be the biggest point of contention. But just think to yourself, do a thought experiment. When you're performing your actions every day, even when you're talking to somebody and you're trying to convince them that your religion's right and they're wrong, where is it coming from? Is it because you want them to go to heaven and you're afraid they're going to go to hell, and you're afraid you're going to go to hell? Well, then I'm sorry to inform you, but your actions are being performed out of fear. You know, and is that how you want to live your life, based on fear? Is that how God or Jesus wants you to live your life, based on fear? These are just questions we're asking. Maybe right. You think it is yes, and then you know, but as long as you're aware of that, I think that's a real big one.
Yeah. And remember, all the angels in the Bible that ever came and visit people would say, have no fear. Don't fear.
Even Jesus said it. Didn't he say it allegedly like 365 times or something? Once for every day of the year.
Oh, did he? Okay. Well, something there you go. Him too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think fear is one of the big ones. So, I mean, that alone
is huge in organized religion. It's fear. Fear is everywhere. And that's how they control people, is through fear. It's kind of like scientism has become a religion, and they're controlled by the fear of something that could touch them and cause them to die.
And that's
like,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, and dying just takes you to the next place. So why are you fearing that? Go ahead.
And that's a great example too, because you have people that go along, say we're talking about the 311 sniffles, coughing situation.
The 311 episode on 2020.
Yeah. so you have people that are not, covering their face or not showing their smiling face. Some people are doing it because they think they might get sick, and some people are just doing it because they don't want to hear other people, or they just want to fall in. They think it's the right thing to do. I mean, there's a million reasons why people do it, but that's a perfect snapshot of organized religion, because I think you've talked about before how with your parents, you think that your dad wasn't as into it and he kind of just went along, right?
No, I think he was very much into it. And something I didn't mention that I could have mentioned when I was talking about this was that he and my mom were like prayer warriors. And
Ooh.
like I'm talking like people would be healed because they prayed for them. Like they were Reiki masters, if you know what I'm saying. Like they'd pray for somebody over the phone and this person would be healed. They would pray for somebody who was trying to have a baby for years and years and years, couldn't have a baby, prayed for them, and they got pregnant. I mean, I have had people tell me, your dad prayed for me and I have a miracle baby because your dad prayed for me. So, I mean, I can't doubt those things. Those things really happened. I mean, he really was a prayer warrior for those things. Now, intention is everything. He really, really put his whole energy and intention into that woman being able to have a baby. And he really put his intention into that man getting out of the sickbed from the hospital or whatever. So, I mean, those things really did happen. But there's an energy we don't know, like we don't even understand or comprehend how this energy works. Like that video that I sent you.
Could it be something that we don't know? We don't know.
Exactly.
And I'll even further add, those people that he talked to, they believed that they could be healed by him.
Absolutely. So it takes both ends.
They were fucking healed because they believed in it. Exactly. That's why belief is such a strong thing, because you could cure illness because of it, or you can also, drive everyone away or whatever.
Or be in fear.
Or you could be in fear. There you go.
Or create an egregore.
In fear, and which allows yourself to be caught into one of these traps that we're talking about.
Exactly. And controlled.
And one of the things we want to talk about is the new age deception. This is something that Mark Passio talks about as well. And again, all these people we talk about, like it's not like I agree with everything they say. We talked about a lot of people in this episode.
We talk about Owen Benjamin, and we don't agree with everything he says either.
I talk about Joe Rogan. You know what I mean? Like, so when I bring up some of these people, and
Mark Passio, James True.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan.
I do love Mark Passio.
Owen Benjamin. I love Mark Passio's stuff too. Santos Bonacci. I love Santos.
Yeah. And this is the thing, because these guys dedicated their life to putting out this message, whether you agree with the message or not. That's one thing. But again, like we were saying earlier, like Crow, he still listened to this guy who's related to Saint Germain, the guy Fortune, because he had all this knowledge, and he wasn't worried about the guy's belief or
cosmology
about this world. Yeah.
The Earth. Yeah.
So the new age thing, what I want to talk about here is there are a lot of truths in there, because in the new age, it's all about love yourself and love everybody, and we're all connected and we're all one. And these are all great ideas, but the trap,
in some regard, they're true.
Oh yeah, a lot of it is true. It's like this nuanced thing, and it really is like a minefield. It's like a fucking minefield out there. It's a minefield for your attention. People want your attention, right? Everyone's like your
mine
soul.
Or mind field.
Yeah, it's both. It's a minefield. Oh, it's a minefield. Mine. So. Yeah,
I know what you were thinking.
So the new age, it's like it's about inaction, right? So that's the trap. They'll, from what I've seen, it's all about meditation, and everything's perfect. Which, in some regard, when you talk about the Tao, there's a way that you could view the world as perfect, because, I mean, hey, God created this, right? We've talked about this before. Do you believe in God? Yeah. Do you believe he created it all? Yeah. Does he make mistakes? No. Well, then what the hell, right? There's no mistakes.
Isn't everything perfect?
Therefore, it is perfect. But that doesn't mean you could just sit up in a mountain all day and meditate because of it and just let things happen to you. Because if you look at it, that's how their governments or the people over there might have used this system of control, through passivity. So they had everybody being passive, and they were just allowing all these things to happen that probably shouldn't have happened. Whereas in the Western thing, it's all about action. So our fear, instead of allowing us to remain passive, it gets us active in doing things that we're doing out of fear. So it could just be used by people at the top in a different way. So it's really just like an inversion. And that's what got me back into Christianity, and got me back into like the path of Christ and esoteric Christianity and Hermeticism and all these ideas from the West. Because if you look deep down far enough, all this stuff could have been said to either be like some kind of belief system that was known around the world, or it originated from the West, from our part of the world, or whatever the hell it is, man. You know, now that I'm, geez, not only do I
the realm,
but what I'm saying is, like, I was listening to someone else talk, and they were saying how, you know, what if Asian people were already in San Francisco? Because they were in Hawaii when the explorers came. You know, like, doesn't that blow your mind? That everyone's like, why are there so many Asians in San Francisco? What if they're always there? You know, just like there's a lot of,
could it be,
Black people down south, you know, and
I always,
what if they're always there?
speaking of that, okay, it's funny that this is coming up, because I get asked if I'm Asian pretty often.
You're not?
So even yesterday, I got a phone call from somebody was asking me a question, and then and she said, oh, is that because of your, and I gave her an answer, and she's like, oh, is that because of your Asian background? And I was like, no, I mean, no, because I'm not Asian, but also, yeah, I was like, but I'm not offended by that. I'm just,
you're like, no, squared, and I'll explain my answer.
But growing up, I always wondered, because I would see like National Geographic or whatever you're watching, right? And you would see like, oh, look at the people in, you know, Mongolia. And then you would see these faces, and then you're like, oh, look at the people from Peru. And then I'd be like, well, they look the same to me. Like, what if they were related? Like, what if they were all related and they all look? So why all of a sudden is, oh no, the people from South America, they're different. You know, they're a different, you know, race of indigenous people. The Mongolians are different. And it's like, why? They freaking look the same. You know what I mean? Like, they look indigenous, and they have very, very, like, their eyes are like more like this. Right. And I think that's why I get asked that question. And I never saw it before in myself until some years ago, like a good several years ago. When I first downloaded Snapchat for the first time, I was with my friend Anna, and we were at a coffee shop, and we're just like being dopey and silly. And we're like, let's do some Snapchat. So we're like doing the Snapchat, and at one point I swap faces with her, and we do a Snapchat, and we're just snapping pictures. And I didn't even look at the pictures until later. And then later on, I saw the picture where she and I had swapped faces. And I was like, oh, I didn't even recognize myself. Because of course it wasn't me. It was me with, you know what I mean? It was me with her face and her face with me. But it was like, it only swapped certain features. So it swapped my eyes, but not my teeth. You know what I mean? It was weird. I can't remember what it did. But I saw the picture, and I was like, oh my God, I look like my Chinese friend, you know, forgot her name at the moment, but I was like, oh my God, I look like her. Lisa, that's her name. I was like, oh my God, I look like my friend Lisa. I was like, I get it. I get why people say that now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's such a crazy, amazing thought experiment to have.
Yeah.
And it really just goes toward the division, right? It's like, well, you have this culture, so now you got to fight against this person because they have that culture. And, you know, it's more just division. And you know, I feel that culture is really important. And,
but it shouldn't be divisive. You should be open to
Yeah.
hearing other people's cultures and listening to their thoughts and how they do things. And, even if you don't agree with how they do things, but at least be open to hearing what they say.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the point where I think we want to talk about, let's see, did we talk about all the divisive stuff? Oh, we kind of did want to talk about, the next thing we want to talk about was worshiping the messenger. And I feel like that's where a lot of the organized Christianity gets it wrong. And I feel like it's an idolization of this character named Jesus Christ, and people will pray
Well,
to him.
Jesus, right? And I think they gave him the name Christ because he had achieved Christ consciousness. And that was the point. I mean,
Yeah.
that was why they called him Christ, but not because, anyway, you go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's an important distinction. But I would say in their words, they say we worship Jesus Christ and Christ is King and all this stuff. And I feel, again, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it, just other than the idol worship thing. Because where does it lead you? And the problem I see here is, if you take that as the most important thing out of your cosmology and you place that above other stuff, as far like if you place worshiping Jesus ahead of actually acting like him and living the life that was put out, in the Bible that he lived, I think that that's where the confusion comes in, because, or I mean, the issues and the problems come in, because if you idolize him and you judge other people because they don't worship him, you're in a state of judgment. So you're already not following his footsteps. So it's kind of like, what's going to help people at the end of the day? And if you break it down logically in an intuitional way, and we talk about division, is this just another form of division? Is it just another way you're allowing yourself to be divided? And then again, why do you have this thought? Is it because if you don't believe in him, he's not going to come at the end of the world and save your soul, and you're going to go to hell and burn in a fiery pit? That's fear again. It's fear.
Right.
And I think that, fear is a good tool. Like, there's a lot of people who live quote unquote a moral life because they are afraid of what's going to happen to them. But I think the way that we found and that we're starting to live, it's more about compassion and love, and not in like, that's why I want to talk about the new age stuff, not in like a hippy dippy way, but just about a way to love yourself first, and not in a selfish way, not in a solipsistic way where you're the center of the universe. It's just that, no, you have to be okay with the person that you are and your tendencies, and to get to know yourself. And then you could express like all these astrological tendencies we talk about. I feel it's just like a snapshot. This is not a Snapchat commercial, everybody. A snapshot of, like, when you're born, it's just a snapshot of the sky clock and where everything is. And it doesn't determine who you are in a way of like,
Predestination.
it's not predestination. It's just letting you know tendencies based on the sky clock.
Absolutely.
Because of all the different aspects that all the different planets or luminaries,
It's
I
an
guess we could
influence over your life, basically.
say. Yeah,
It's
well,
the influence that it had on you on the day you were born. So those things could very well pertain to you and could be things that you should be aware of. And they
yeah,
could be things that
exactly.
you could work on. Just like I said about myself, when I'm passionate, I can be aggressive. I can seem aggressive because I get loud and I get, excited, but it comes across, negatively to some people that don't know me very well.
Exactly. And it's up to you to figure that out about yourself, to heal yourself, to realize why you feel like you have to prove that, like, all this new information that you came across. Why do you have to convince somebody else that it's the answer? Is it because there's a hole inside of you that you need their validation to feel okay about this information? It's questions like this that we start to ask. And I think that that'll bring us perfectly into one of the last things that we want to talk about, which is where we're at now with our cosmology, I guess you could say, in our apertures,
Yeah.
our way we look at the world.
Which is, I would call it like true spirituality, which is, to me, it's like, again, we were talking about going within, knowing self. This is what people like Santos and Bill Donahue talk about, is raising the chrism, going to a place of the Christ consciousness. I mean, you can't get there overnight, but just arriving at that place through things like meditation. Because quieting your mind and being alone and in solitude really helps you dissect yourself to know self very well. And again, these are some of the things that Brandon and I have have helped Brandon and I, is being on our own and kind of figuring those things out. But other things that have contributed to that are other books and scriptures. And one of those first books that actually Brandon told me about was the Tao. I mean, it's spelled Tao, so I always want to spell it with a D, but it's Tao, the Tao Te Ching, which was by somebody named Lao Tzu, allegedly. And it's just a book of, Brandon, you can talk about it more, but it's amazing. I love that book.
It's basically, the legend behind it is that there was this guy who was retired, and he was like this spiritual guy or whatever, really high up in the society, and he was going to a different province to live, and the guard's like, well, you gotta pay the toll, and he's like, I don't have any money. He's like, he explains the situation. He's like, all right, well then go down there and write everything you learned about life. So he just wrote all these verses about life, and we quoted it, and one of the quotes is, those who know don't talk, those who talk don't know. So it's like these, you kind of even look at them like as parables or riddles, just
or like even Psalms,
so, yeah,
or proverb, like Proverbs.
Yeah, that's a really good way
better
to put
word. Yeah.
And it's just a different way of looking at the world, and it make it, for
in a
me,
selfless way, probably, I would say.
yeah, very selfless. And it helps, I think it could help people in our society, because like I said, we're so in this right brain way of doing everything. Like everything's got to be action, logical, and like go.
You mean left brain or right brain?
Oh yeah, left brain, I'm sorry.
I was like,
yeah,
okay.
as I said it, that's why I was like, I think I'm getting this wrong, but I always do, because I think right-handed, so right-handed is left brain. Yeah, so left brain, that's why I was, way of looking at the world. So it's a different way of being able to interpret it and stuff like that. And there's a lot of different Eastern mysticism that'll get you into that, or Eastern religions or whatever that have that. But again, like we say, there's always this new age deception trap that you can get caught into. So not everybody that talks about the Tao or the Bhagavad Gita or any of these things, it's not like they get it. And it's not like all the answers are contained in the Tao. But for me, it's just like a guide, and it's a tool that I can use for that. And I mean, we've come across so many of them, but yeah, that's one thing I want to say about the Tao. Also, I want to say we are at over 2 hours in this episode.
Are we?
So yeah.
Are you sure? Because
we started recording after 3:00, I believe, right? Or it was like right at 3:00.
Okay, yeah, we might be over 2 hours. Yeah.
So what I wanted to say is the other stuff, this stuff we want to talk about now, about what we're into now, we could kind of tie it up a little bit, give a brief thing, and then in the next episode we can expand, because we allegedly might have a guest, and this is a lot of the stuff that we can actually talk about, because it'll be relevant to all three of us. So we don't have to expand too much, I don't think, on where we're at now. If we want to,
I mean, we can totally talk about the rest in another episode for sure.
But what I did want to talk about though is the last thing we were going to end with was how it's individual. I mean, we can talk about this in the next episode too, but I think that's really important to get that in this episode, is that I don't think there is one true answer. That's why I kind of hold back now when I'm talking to people and just kind of go off what they're thinking, because I think that the best way to put it is another one of these sayings, which is like, there's many
multiple ways to skin a cat. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. There's many ways to skin a cat. There's one mountaintop, but one peak, but many different paths up that peak. And
Exactly.
so I think that all this stuff, because I had to go through what I had to go through to get to know what I know now. And I can't, again, use my words to describe exactly how I feel about it. I just get lost in it. And then people misunderstand words and it gets misinterpreted, and they're only taking in what I'm saying at a fraction, right? So there's no real way to explain the right way. That's why I don't think there is a right way. And I think that that's the chief of this division, is people are convinced that there's only one way.
Exactly. I concur. Yeah. It's just, and I go back to nature. Okay. I think there were so many people in this world that lived in different places. You see the people, the Inuit people that lived like Alaska area, or, in that cold area in the Arctic, and they ate whale blubber, for crying out loud. I mean, but they were fine, and then you have people in the desert, like the Bushmen of Kalahari, who ate roots and water from the roots. There is no one way. This whole realm was given to us, and we find what works for us, because there is no one way.
Yeah. And that kind of reminds me of something I wanted to say, which is a James True concept again, which is dojo earth, which he kind of puts it in a way that, like, you're here, or could it be that we're here to experience what the world is, and then we have to figure out on our own, what the best way forward is, and it's in every single decision that we make. And the best thing is you can't really fuck up, because you can always choose to alter your behavior and make different decisions. And those wrong decisions, the quote unquote wrong ones, are the mistakes. Those are the real teachers. That's how we learn, through pain. When we fuck somebody over and it makes us feel bad, then we know, shit, we don't want, then you can come to an understanding that, well, I don't want to feel that way, so why would I want to make somebody else feel that way? And even when I do make them feel that way, this joy or whatever it is, bliss or whatever I thought I was going to get from it, it's just an empty, hollow feeling, at the end of the day. So the dojo earth concept is pretty cool, because it really takes a lot of the stress and tension, or it did for me, because I really realized that there really is no wrong way. And this isn't something I just came across from James True, just other teachings and stuff. You got to do so if it's still a question in your mind whether you should do something or not, you do it, and you do it, and you do it, and then you don't like what happens, so then you alter your behavior. So then, through knowing, and then when you build upon that, you could use that experience, just like any master in any area. Like, I'm a awesome wedding DJ, and I learned how to do that. And then I could apply, when I start to do comedy, I could start to see how I mastered this realm of like wedding DJing or whatever. And I can apply that to stand-up comedy in certain ways. I mean, it's not the same thing, but there's shortcuts that I learned about things and other stuff that I overcome. So in that same way, we make these mistakes. It's just the shadow, the negative, the bad side. And then the good is the learning. So you're just kind of feeling your way, really, at the end of the day. We're like groping in the dark. But I really feel like I wanted to get that in here, because people are always going to ask stuff like that. Like, what do you think this really is? And at the end of the day, it could be as simple as, like, when people talk about simulation theory, like we're in a computer program. I don't really think we're in a computer program, but that could be the best way to describe it in the words that we have from our knowing, because we don't know anything else. It could just be this place for souls, or whatever we are, our eternal self, part that never dies, for it to actually learn. Because if you could teach somebody all day about what it's like to put a roof on. You could have classes about roofing and teach somebody, but you can also show them that all in one day by taking them on a roof and doing it. And how are you going to ever show a being, an eternal being, whatever it is, evil or bad or like a negative thing unless they experience it for themselves? So that's why a lot of people think this is some kind of like training for a god realm or whatever, like where we're just going to become these gods, or maybe we already are, but we just have to learn these lessons. So I know it's some crazy stuff, but that's really the only way for us to learn, just by going back to that other episode, is knowing, experience. You got to feel it for yourself. You got to make those mistakes. So
yeah,
that's why this isn't a judgment on anyone, even if there are into organized religion and stuff like that. We're not judging anybody. If it works for you, that's great,
yeah. And what you said about well, I was just thinking, like, indoctrination camps don't teach you like how to do something. They teach you the theory. You have to go to like a trade school to actually learn how to do something, and learn by experience, by apprenticeship and stuff like that. It's like they're already indoctrinating you into this format of like, oh, you don't need to know how to do it. We're going to show you the theory behind it. Could it be?
Yeah, and really what they're doing is just teaching you how to take instruction and learn and be a good little slave. Anyway.
Yeah. Dare we say?
Dare we say?
How dare we?
Is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we finished up this episode?
I don't think so. I think we can definitely talk about more next time.
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything that you had in your mind that you wanted to get out now. That's cool though. I mean,
thank you. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're probably pushing it at the over 2-hour mark.
Yeah, everybody, you're welcome for the long episode, everybody. Hopefully the people in the chat stuck around, and thank you guys so much for being in the chat. We love you. We love to interact with you. It's so much fun. And it, like I say every week, it's really the reason why we do it is because of all our lovely fans. I don't know what to say. Supporters,
shout out to all the people
friends,
who watch our show.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, this has been the Oversharing Show. You can check out my website, morelawsmoreproblems.com. If you have any questions or concerns or whatever, just comment underneath. Let us know what you want us to talk about in the future, or if you disagree or agree with us, whatever it is. And what do we say to the good Sharon? What do we say to the good people, Sharon?
That if you're not oversharing,
then you're totally not caring.
That's right.
And Sharon's Karen.